The Nile River, Egypt, and Sudan. The Nile River. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote that Egypt was the gift of the Nile. An unending source of sustenance, it played a crucial role in the development of Egyptian civilization. Because the river overflowed its banks annually and deposited new layers of silt, the surrounding land was very fertile. The Nile River originates in East Africa, in Lake Victoria, and in Ethiopia, in Lake Tana. The White Nile flows north from Lake Victoria through Uganda and into Sudan, where it converges with the Blue Nile at the city of Khartoum, Sudan's capital. The Blue Nile originates in Lake Tana in Ethiopia. From Khartoum, the Nile River flows north through the Nubian Desert into Egypt, where it eventually reaches the Mediterranean Sea. The fresh water of the Nile is a lifeline that enables agriculture and transportation and supports a growing human population in the region. The Nile River is also home to a variety of animals and plant life. Tropical rainforest is found along parts of the Nile. On the Sudanese plains, there is open grassland with thorny trees which become swampy during the rainy season. Traveling north of Khartoum, there is desert, and vegetation along the Nile in Egypt is the result of irrigation. Until the Aswan High Dam was completed in 1968, the river flooded its banks yearly, depositing silt and nutrients onto the soil and causing enormous damage to infrastructure. As far back as when the pharaohs ruled Egypt, the people used flood irrigation to grow their crops. Today, water is pumped from the controlled Nile River onto the fields to water the crops. This change has increased the number of crops that can be grown per year. However, it's also caused a buildup of salt in the soil, resulting in declining soil quality. Without annual flooding, the salts cannot be dissolved away by the remaining soil, reducing yields. Almost a third of Egypt's population works in agriculture. About half the population is rural. Egypt. Egypt has one of the longest histories of any country. Ancient Egypt saw some of the earliest developments of writing, agriculture, urbanization, organized religion, and central government. Egypt's long and rich cultural heritage is an integral part of its national identity, which has endured and often assimilated various foreign influences, including Greek, Persian, Roman, Arab, Ottoman Turk, and Nubian. Apart from the Nile Valley, the majority of Egypt's landscape is desert, with a few oases scattered about. Egypt is the driest and sunniest country in the world. Winds create prolific sand dunes that peak at more than 100 feet. Egypt includes parts of the Sahara Desert and the Libyan Desert. These deserts protected the kingdom of the pharaohs from western threats and were referred to as Red Land in ancient Egypt. Cairo, Egypt's capital, lies at the northern end of the Nile River. With a population of more than 10 million, it is the largest North African city and home to more Arabs than any other city in the world. It is considered the cornerstone of Arab culture. Cairo is so crowded that more than 1 million people live in its old cemetery, the City of the Dead. Cairo's residents and the millions of people in Egypt depend on the Nile River for their survival. About 95% of Egypt's population lives within 15 miles of the Nile River. As the population has grown, urban expansion has encroached on the farmland of the Nile Valley. Egypt can no longer produce enough food for its people. About 15% of its food comes from other countries, mainly the United States. Conflicts between democratic reforms and Islamic fundamentalism are evident in Egypt. Egypt is predominantly Sunni Muslim, with Islam as its state religion. It has been ranked as the 5th worst country in the world for religious freedom. 84% of Egyptians polled supported the death penalty for those who leave Islam. 77% supported whippings and cutting off the hands for theft and robbery. And 82% support stoning a person who commits adultery. The growing population has been a major concern. In Egypt's case, democratic reformers were able to promote a strong program to help reduce family size, which in 2008 was at 2.8 children per woman and declining. The government even created a popular Egyptian soap opera to promote the concept that it was appropriate in an Arab culture to use family planning and have a small family. The primetime program, called And the Nile Flows On, told the story of a young village bride dealing with the issues of pregnancy and life complicated by the interjection of a progressive sheik and a meddling female doctor. The drama addressed many family planning and religious issues regarding the acceptability of breaking with tradition to address the growing population problem in Egypt. Egypt is a cultural mix, with a strong heritage steeped in Arab history, with a secular side that is open to the outside world. The cultural forces that create this paradox have not always been in unison. Egypt has a major connection to Western society because of tourism. The pyramids of Giza and the Great Sphinx are major attractions that pull in millions of people per year from around the world. Tourism opens up Egypt to outside elements from various cultural backgrounds, most of which are secular. It also provides employment for about 12% of Egypt's workforce and revenue for the country. Egyptian cuisine is notably conductive to vegetarian diets, as it relies heavily on legumes and vegetable dishes. Although food in Alexandria and the coast of Egypt tend to use a great deal of fish and other seafood, for the most part, Egyptian cuisine is based on foods that grow out of the ground. Meat has been very expensive for most Egyptians throughout history, so a great number of vegetarian dishes have been developed. Common meats are rabbit, pigeon, chicken, and lamb. Cow and sheep brains are also eaten. Politics in Egypt has been in turmoil, with protests against President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, whose name I just pronounced poorly. There have been accusations of corruption and abuses of power. Sudan and South Sudan. Comparable in size to the entire United States east of the Mississippi River, Sudan was formerly the largest country in Africa. The capital city of Khartoum lies where the Blue Nile River converges with the White Nile. Khartoum's government has a black Arab majority and follows Islam, complete with Sharia laws. The African Transition Zone crosses Sudan and separates the Arab-Muslim north from the mainly African Christian south. There was a civil war between the north and the south for decades. In 2003, various groups in Darfur complained that the Khartoum government was neglecting them. A militia group, calling itself the Janjaweed, was recruited by the local Arabs to counter the resistance in Darfur. The Janjaweed began an ethnic cleansing campaign that pushed into the Darfur region, burning villages, hurting women, and killing anyone who opposed them. Refugees began to flee into the neighboring country of Chad. In this particular case, the campaign was not based on religious divisions, because both sides were Muslim. This was an ethnic conflict, in that the people of Darfur are of traditional African background, and the people of northern Sudan consider themselves Arab, even though they may have dark skin. An estimated 300,000 people died in this conflict. There were more than 2.7 million refugees, many of them in Chad. Just as the government of Sudan denied the slave trade, it denied that it supported Janjaweed. The African Union provided a modest number of peacekeeping troops before the UN stepped in to provide security. Food, water, and care for the refugees taxed the region's aid and support system. Before a peace agreement brokered in 2005, military soldiers from the north would raid the villages in the south, just taking women and children as slaves. Slavery in the region of Sudan has a long history, beginning in the ancient Nubian and ancient Egyptian times, and continuing to the present. Though the Sudanese government denied the slave trade, thousands of Africans were owned by northern black Arabs in Sudan, and many still are. The world community has made little effort to intervene. The price for a slave in Sudan is about $50. The differences in religion, ethnicity, and culture have always divided southern Sudan from the north. In January of 2011, the southern region of Sudan voted on a referendum that allowed the South to break away and become an independent country called the Republic of South Sudan. The acceptance of this new republic changed the map of the region and the dynamics between South Sudan and North Sudan. The new Republic of South Sudan was formalized in July of 2011. Juba was designated as the capital. The many clans and indigenous groups made it difficult for unity and cohesiveness in the country. Armed groups in the various states continued to cause internal division, while at the same time, boundary disputes continued to be worked out with northern Sudan. South Sudan is covered in tropical forests, swamps, and grasslands. It has an equatorial tropical climate with a rainy season featuring high humidity. It is considerably greener than Sudan in the north. South Sudan's protected area of Bandinglo National Park hosts the second largest wildlife migration in the world. Animals like giraffes, cheetahs, lions, hyenas, African wild dogs, and multiple species of antelope live in this park. South Sudan's forest reserves also provide habitat for other animals like elephants, chimpanzees, and bongo. South Sudan is home to the ethnic groups of the Dinka, Nuer, Bari, and Azandi. The Dinka mainly live on traditional agricultural and pastoralism, relying on cattle husbandry as cultural pride, not for commercial profit or for meat, but cultural demonstrations, rituals, marriages, dowries, and milk feeding for all ages. The Dinka are known for being very dark, thin, and tall. Many in South Sudan still live traditional lifestyles, and some still follow indigenous animist beliefs. For many, cattle is a symbol of wealth and the target of sometimes violent and deadly raids. The water supply in South Sudan is faced with numerous challenges. Although the White Nile runs through the country, water is scarce during the dry season in areas that are not located on the river. About half of the population does not have access to an improved water source, defined as a protected well, standpipe, or a hand pump within a kilometer. The few existing piped water supply systems are often not well maintained, and the water they provide is often not safe to drink. Sudan, North. Sudan, or Northern Sudan, has extremely dry areas in the north, with grasslands and tropical savannas to the south. The dry regions are plagued by sandstorms, known as haboob, which can completely block out the sun. In the northern and western semi-desert areas, people rely on the scant rainfall for basic agriculture, and many are nomadic, traveling with their herds of sheep and camels. Nearer the River Nile, there are well-irrigated farms growing cash crops. Agriculture is Sudan's most important sector, employing 80% of the workforce. But most farms remain rain-fed and susceptible to drought. Sudan is rated the 5th hungriest nation in the world. As stated before, the legal system in Sudan is based on Islamic Sharia law. Stoning, flogging, and even crucifixion are legal punishments. Sudan's public order allows police officers to publicly whip women who are accused of public indecency. Muslims who convert to Christianity can face the death penalty. Due to a 1991 penal code, or public order law, women were not allowed to wear trousers in public because it was interpreted as an obscene outfit. The punishment for wearing pants could be up to 40 lashes, but after being found guilty in 2009, one woman was fined the equivalent of $200 instead. In Sudan, 34% of girls are married off before the age of 18. The current legal marriage of girls in Sudan is age 10. According to the Corruption's Perception Index, Sudan is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Sudan has 597 groups that speak over 400 different languages and dialects. As you can imagine, there are many different cultures, beliefs, and cuisines based in these particular groups. Sudanese cuisine is varied by region and is greatly affected by the cross cultural influences in Sudan throughout history. Meals include elamara, elamarara, and umfitit, which are made from sheep's offal, which include the lungs, liver, and stomach, onions, peanut butter, and salt. They're eaten raw. Some stews are made with okra, sheep's fat, cattle, or sheep hooves, and onions. Goat meat and fish are also consumed. There are a variety of porridges made from sorghum or millet. Peanuts are also used in a variety of dishes. Other regional cuisine is influenced by Arab cuisine, such as falafel. Despite the corruption and difficulties in the country, there are many kind people living out their lives,